Welcome to my Accent is No Accident podcast. I'm your host, Maritza Perez. And today we have a very special guest, a woman who is bridging divides through transformative conversations. Her name, Daniela Cohen. Daniela Cohen's mission is exactly that, to help bridge divides, to build communities where everyone can thrive. Daniela has extensive experience facilitating programs to create equitable, inclusive communities in Canada and South Africa. Her expertise includes designing and implementing systems to create conflict-positive organizations and environment, well as youth engagement programs to foster skills in inclusive leadership. Daniela is also a woman-centered coach, helping women to break through hidden internal barriers to soar towards their dreams. As a journalist and writer, Daniela believes in the power of storytelling to create social transformation. Welcome, Daniela. It is an honor to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Maritza. It's really wonderful to be here.
I am very happy and I am very honored to have you really today because your story is amazing.
Thank you.
But before we start, I would like to start with the main question that we have. Daniela, what is your accent and why is not an accident?
So my is South African. I was born in South Africa and I lived there until I was 16. And then my family moved to Canada when I was 16. And my accent is definitely not an accident because I never lost it. And actually, that was very, very intentional. I really hung on to my accent. I didn't want to lose it because it was such an important part of my identity, because it's connected to being South African, which is a really important part of my identity.
Yeah, that that is what it amazes me because people try to get rid of their accents, but really it's your authenticity and it's
Yeah,
who you are makes you a part of who you are. Yes, if you are learning another language, yes, you have to kind of like try to use your phonetics and try to accentuate better and be better in the language, but don't lose that accent that makes you who you are.
absolutely. Yeah, I think it's like, you know, it's interesting the conversation because I used to teach English to people learning English as a second language or a foreign language. And, some people, it's just they're really, really focusing and almost fixating on losing the accent. But it's like you're saying that accent is it's a piece of who you are, it's part of your identity. And it's more about being able to communicate with people rather than like assimilating by losing
Exactly.
your accent. Yeah.
Exactly. And then in that in your identity, that part of living in South Africa marked the beginning of your life. It was an impactful experience for you. And
Yeah.
can you bring me back to a memory of a childhood memory that will be key point that influence you, your passion to connecting diverse individuals?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually grew up in South Africa during apartheid. So there was racial discrimination, in law, racial segregation. And so what it meant for me was that, when I was going to school in South Africa, all the other kids in my class were white. And it's only when I turned 15 and things started to shift in the country that people of other races came into my school. So that was the first time that I'd ever had the chance to meet kids of different races and backgrounds. And I remember being so excited, and really interested and curious to talk to different people. And I made different friends. And one of the friends that I made, she was a black girl named Hlubi, and she was living in the townships of Soweto. So the townships were areas, they're still areas where Black people were forced to live during apartheid in really poor conditions. And so when the schools opened to different races, what would happen is they would have a bus go and pick her up in her area and take kids from that area to the school and then bring them back in the afternoon. And she told me that it took like an hour on the bus every day. So I was really surprised to hear that because, my mom drove me to school and we didn't live that far away. So it just started to open my eyes to the fact that people were living really different lives to mine. We became really good friends and, we hung out in school, but we could never go to each other's houses. And so it was kind of like this friendship within very confined walls. And that's something that's always stuck with me because it was painful. I wanted to be able to hang out with her outside of school, and it just really wasn't possible. And there was also the kind of sense of like, you know, um, when I was hanging out with her, like, I don't think that my friends were really, oh, that's so great, or her friends were really, that's so great, because
Mm.
people were still kind of stuck in their groups,
Yeah.
So I think what that's a memory that's always stuck with me, because it had this amazement of finally being able to connect with people of different races, but then the reality of like how confined that actually was,
Yes.
how restricted it was.
Like it was a hit of reality
Yeah,
for you.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so, I just really, for me, that's fueled this passion to be able to have people of different races, different backgrounds in the same space where people can actually share life experiences, stories, get to know each other,
Yes.
in those ways.
Yes. And was this the school only for girls, or was this a school that was
No, it
mixed?
was mixed school.
Okay. Okay, yes, because I know that there was also a couple of schools that were only boys, only girls. That
Yes, there
yes.
were, but I wasn't in that school.
Yes, yes. So I know that I have heard that during the apartheid, there are many things that are did. So outside of the school, the two of you cannot talk or even go visit each other's houses. Am I correct?
Well, I wouldn't say at the time, because things were starting to open up, I wouldn't say it was prohibited, but it wasn't normal. Like, the first step, okay, the schools are now with kids of mixed races, but that doesn't mean we're socializing outside of that. And like you
Yes.
can still see that today in South Africa, that even though everything's changed, the laws have changed, but that ability of people to cross those lines socially, it's not always there. So I think it's like a next level of being able to do that, which definitely wasn't there at that time.
Yes. And then was there any laws against um having mixed um mixed races marriages?
There were, I don't know, so that was 1993, so it was a year before the first democratic elections, when Nelson Mandela became president. So I don't know where that law was at the time because I was pretty young, right? So I wasn't really
Yes,
tuned into
yes,
all these kinds of like where exactly the laws were, but um, things were starting to change. So it was like the
yes,
year before that election starting to slowly change, and then the
yes.
election happened, and then all the laws
Exactly.
changed.
And then obviously as a child, you're like, what is going on? Why am I different? Why am I like I have all these privileges? Why do my friends don't have that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's I think what happened for me when she was talking about the bus, and I started to realize those things. But I think it's like one of those things when you grow up in a system where this is normal, like this is your life. You don't really think about it too much. And then, after that, like moving to Canada,
Yes.
growing, getting more, well, becoming older, getting more experience, and then looking back and being able to see many more things that I didn't see at the time.
Yes, become younger. So that was the next thing that I wanted to talk about. So that this was your early life, and then you were only 16 when you moved to Canada, which is still a child. Then you move to Canada, and then you find out that, oh, everything is totally different here. Was
Very
it,
much so.
was there a cultural shock for you in that moment? Was it a relief? How did you feel on that change?
Um, it definitely wasn't a relief. I think I, you know, the time before we left was really the happiest time for me. Like I was really loving just having all this diversity in my school. It was really exciting for me. It it felt like something like an environment that I really thrived in,
Mhm.
and I didn't want to leave. And it meant leaving family, leaving friends. It wasn't my decision. My mom wanted to leave for safety reasons. So it was a really, really hard adjustment. And I think that was part of like hanging on to my accent, just, trying to find comfort in the things that I
Mm.
knew and the
Which
home
is
that I had.
to make you you, the things that make you who you were.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah.
so you come back to Canada and you obviously grow up, but then you decide to return and you decide to return and volunteer at Swift. How was
Mhm.
that experience and how that experience shaped your perspective on helping women and helping them and being empowered and solid and with their storytelling?
Yeah, I mean, I think that experience is it's really one of the most impactful experiences I've ever had. It was a very important experience for me because I wanted to get into international development at the time.
Yeah.
And it was like, you need to do some kind of longer volunteering experience or internship. And I really started to feel, if I'm going to do this, I want to do it in South Africa. I want to start there. And so I went for a year it was a really rural area, working with African women who'd been trained as journalists by an American journalist who'd gone there and set up the school. And in that second year, they lost quite a bit of funding. So what we were doing, it was me and two other volunteers, is we were really mentoring five of the journalists who'd been trained the year before and just helping them get even better at telling their stories because they'd created this community newspaper. So
Oh,
that was really what the year was. And for me, as as amazing as it was to be able to support them, facilitate their development as journalists, I think what was more important for me personally was just being able to make these connections with these African women because I had never, like I was talking about my friend, right? I'd never really had the opportunity to do that in this new South Africa. So that was really, really, it was really, really important to me. Um, and it was also difficult, it was very emotional.
yeah.
Um, the other volunteers that were there were American. So it's very different to be there as Americans versus being a white South African with everything that carries, um, and all those connections.
Yes, because you were like an insider, like working as an outsider, but you really were an
Right,
insider.
right. And inside,
Hi, I'm very happy to know you are here watching our podcast today. It is an honor to be featuring so many entrepreneurs on the journeys of their inside voice, their accent that is not an accident. And we want to reach out more people like you who are creating a better world of diversity, inclusiveness, equity, and belonging. So please take a moment to hit the subscribe button below like, and share to others. And even if you want to leave a comment, that'll be nice. Thank you for your support. And now back to the episode.
Right, an insider and yet an outsider, right? Because I'd been away for 15 years. Like it was
Yes,
15 years before I went back. So it was a
yes,
long, I mean, I'd been back to visit, but not to live, you know.
yes. And then you started helping both refugees in South Africa as well as in Canada because it was important to you to give back to the community. So how was these experiences during this time?
Yeah, well, what happened with that is actually at the end of this year with the Mars, I was supposed to go back to Canada, but I felt like I'm not ready yet. Um, so what ended up happening is I moved to Cape Town and I started working for the Scalabrini Center, which is a center that supports refugees to integrate.
Mhm.
And I really felt in that space, like very, very much at home. I really felt connected to the refugees that were coming in, to the people that I was working with. And I thought at that time, I thought, oh, this is because, I've got this immigrant experience. So it's not the same, but there's enough that I feel really connected. And it's interesting because only many, many years later, I was doing like research on my family history. And I knew that my family came from Russia to South Africa, but I don't think I really quite understood that they were actually refugees. So I'm Jewish and they were Jewish refugees fleeing from Russia, and that's why they came to South Africa. So I think it was almost like a kind of visceral connection that I felt, even though I
Yes.
didn't really understand it at the time,
Yes.
you know? A-
Yes. So
And
much diversity.
yeah, yeah. And it's kind of a crazy, when I think about it, it's kind of a crazy situation because it's like, my family is fleeing from persecution and they come to South Africa and then it's like, okay, we're white, so now we're being privileged in this other oppressive system. So it's a very weird kind of
Yes.
dynamic, you know?
Yes, exactly. And all of these inspire you to work with women. Women were your focus all the time. So tell me, what was your eye opening that you say, definitely, this is what I want to do for life, and this is, we need to create here a bridge. That's what you call.
Yeah. I think, well, it's funny you said that women have always been my focus. Not really, actually. Not really. Like that's the funny thing. I just kind of ended up working with the
Okay.
Marsvi, and that was focused on women. But then my refugees afterwards, women and men, like it wasn't gender
And
based.
families, and yes.
Families, yeah. I think it's just feeling that because of seeing the division in South Africa and like the impact of that, and also a lot of violence that has happened in South Africa, still happens in South Africa
Mhm,
because of that system of apartheid.
mhm.
Just seeing that impact really has made me passionate about how do we find ways to bring people together, right? To create societies where we can all thrive and have peace. I think
Yes.
that's just been a really important part for me because also we left South Africa because of safety. My mom was really concerned about the crime there. There's a very high crime rate there. So it's
Yes.
kind of like my whole life changed because of what happened.
Yes. It's so it makes you different. It makes you have your eyes open and aware. I think that it changes your awareness around the world. You see more people. You see people for who they are, for the core, for their soul, not only colors.
Yeah, well, I think that is really interesting that you say that because, what you hear sometimes is people saying, well, I don't see color,
Mhm.
and it's kind of said as, well, everyone's equal, everyone's human. There's a lot of good intention behind it. But the reality is, well, you know, people do have different skin
Yes.
colors, different races, and that impacts their experiences in the world. And it's always interesting for me when I hear someone say that, because I'm like I could never say that because of how I grew up. Like color was like front and center, right?
Gotcha.
System
Yes.
based on color.
Yes.
So it does, yeah, it has created a very different kind of level of awareness because I was born into that system.
Yes. So you realize that having this color differentiation is actually a way to bring more connection. Is that what you're saying?
Um, I think what I'm saying is I guess I didn't have a choice in terms of being aware of that and the
Mhm.
impact of that. So it's absolutely, you're right. I'm choosing to use that awareness to be able to bring people together from my lived experience, from my perspective, and the
Mhm.
understanding I got through that. Um, but I think the sad reality is often used to divide people.
Yes. And then you are like basically kind of like you want to be an advocate to facilitate that meaningful connection among
Yeah,
diverse individuals, diverse communities.
yeah, absolutely. Because
Eh,
there's so much beauty in that, right? I mean, that's kind of what I found in my school. It was like so much more interesting for me when there was more diversity in my school, you know, and getting to know
yes.
people whose experiences are different to you. I mean, it's
And,
yeah,
and then it's amazing to see somebody that does the same thing as you with the, but different, totally different, like in a different way.
totally.
Yes. So what thing that today we can do to be more effective in breaking down those barriers that we have created?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a big question, right? And especially right now, you know, we've just had the US election, like all of those things. It's really interesting because, like, for sure, I don't, as you know, one person have the big answer to
Yes,
that,
no.
of course. Um, but I think like some of the work that I do is around creating what I call conflict positive environments and communities. It's work that was developed with the ARIA Group, which is an organization that does conflict transformation work in Ohio. And I think it's really interesting because at the core of that work is really the ability to listen to what somebody's really saying to you. Like,
Mhm.
can I hear you even if I don't agree with you? Can I actually hear you? Can I engage with you in a respectful way,
Yes.
even if I don't agree with you?
Exactly. That is so important. It is important to understand each other from a point of without having a point of view. Just looking, just listening. I listen to you. I understand what you're saying, and I know you're different. I do not agree, but I respect you.
Absolutely. And it sounds so simple, right? But it's
It's
actually really, really hard.
it's,
And
it's hard.
And of course, right? Like we understand it's hard. If you're passionate about something and somebody's saying something that you totally don't agree with, of course you want to react. Of course you want to, you know, try to convince them of your opinion, but that isn't really getting us anywhere.
Yes. So you also are working not only with different cultures and creating these inclusive environments that support the cultural understanding, but you are also helping women. Why women?
Yeah, so and I love that we circled back to this because, you know, like I was saying to you, the work I did with the Masri was just it was almost coincidence working with women specifically. But the work I'm doing now, it's very intentional. So what happened for me is that a few years ago, I discovered these feminine power programs created by Dr. Claire Zammit, and really started becoming aware of through those programs more and more the ways that women have been socialized, but then the ways that affect us in terms of us internalizing some beliefs about ourselves and
Mhm.
about other people, and started to see, like, I'll give you an example. So in the work that I was doing in South Africa, there was a certain point where I became really, really burned out. I was seeing so many people every day, and I remember there was a moment where I kind of sat at my desk and I just thought, oh, if one more person comes in right now, like, I'm just going to lose it, because I can't.
Yes.
I can't do anymore. I can't give anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was such a painful place to be. And so I was like, okay, but I looked around, everybody else is managing fine. So, like, this must be something about me. And, what can I do about it? So, I've always been very into practicing yoga and doing breath work, meditation. So I'm doing all these things, and it's like, well, they help until a point, and then the stress and the overwhelm, it just comes back. And then
Yes.
through these feminine power programs, what I realized is that I was actually tying my value to what I was doing. So it's like the more I'm doing, the more I feel like I'm valuable in some way. And
Yes.
so that was a massive light bulb moment, right? Of realizing, like, it's actually the way that we define service that's leading to the burnout. And it was such an amazing moment for me to realize. And then it shifted things for me, once I had that awareness, I could start showing up differently and serving from a place of I want to give, rather than it's a way to, like, kind of reinforce my value. It's
Yes.
a really different thing, and understanding that so many women are held back by these internal stories that we're telling ourselves. So it's like, even if we're trying to do something, go for that dream, there are all these things that are getting in the way. And I just had such a powerful experience of this, that I really wanted to be able to help others to
Yes.
overcome these barriers as well.
Which is incredible because you experience not only women but other people being oppressed. So probably it is, to me, I will say that it will be a different perspective that you bring on to these women, because if I needed help, I will come to you because you are actually coming from a place that has a different, total different awareness of what a woman can go through,
Mm. Mm.
and then you session firsthand, right? You saw it like right there in your backyard, and you can see how affects a human being.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate your saying that, Maritza, because, yeah, I think it is understanding all the different layers. And one of the things that, you know, my mentor, Dr. Claire Zammit, says is that same process happens for other marginalized groups as well, right? I mean, we sort of know this, the internalization of the societal oppression. And so the same
Yes.
process of having to get through those internal barriers as well as the external barriers. But women have very specific barriers that are different to men.
Yes. And that is amazing. So we're getting almost to the end of our interview, and I would like to give you the opportunity to tell us how can people find you, and uh, how do you help them?
Yeah, thank you. Well, the best way to find me is on my website, which is um, basically www.maritzaperez.com. www.transformativeconversations.ca. That's the easiest way to find me. And I'm sure you'll put a link as well.
Yes.
So,
Yes, I'll put up the links
so
in the
it's
note.
easy. And basically, so like you were saying at the beginning, my overall mission is to be able to bridge divides. And there's a couple of specific services that I'm offering towards that bigger goal. So one of them is conflict transformation. So I do work with organizations and communities. I offer workshops around building conflict positive environments and like I would say workshops with the bigger goal of actually implementing systems within organizations to shift the culture so we can engage conflict constructively. So we start with like a workshop, a second workshop, but the ultimate aim is to embed the system within an organization to shift the culture of avoiding conflict or reacting instead of
Mm-hmm.
responding. So that's one work part of the work that I do. And then another part is women-centered coaching. So I do individual coaching with women, one-on-one. I do group programs with women. And I'm especially focused on women who are making change in the world to be able to support those women because I feel and I know from our own experience of burnout, right, that we're often just putting everything out there to everybody else and we don't have a lot of support ourselves. So that's something I'm really passionate about. And then I do facilitation around equity inclusion, just helping people to raise their awareness around these issues and actions that they can take to create more inclusive communities. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. This was delightful, Daniela. You have made me a different person.
In
Seriously,
in less
this
than 1 hour.
in less than 1 hour, you brought a lot of light to me right now because this can be done. I've been having this podcast just to spread love and togetherness, but then to see people like you working towards it is amazing. It brightens my heart.
Thank you so much, Maritza. And I think that's such an important thing that you said, right? Because I think in these times, it's so easy for us to lose hope, but we can't do that, right? Because we need to be able to be bringing that energy and that light forward and keep doing it even when it's hard. I think it's really, really, really important.
Yes, it is. It is. Thank you so much for this interview. Thank you for agreeing to be here.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's been so wonderful speaking with
Yes.
you. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And to our audience, thank you for being with us today. And just learn from today that, yes, we are beings of love that come here to be loved. Love one another. See you next time. Bye. Hi, it's Maritza here. If you like this episode of My Accent is No Accident podcast and would like to listen more like this, subscribe wherever you're listening to it or watching it. Leave us a nice review and share with your friends, family, and network. Thanks for listening.